Okay, let me see if I can help with conflicting files, um, or just the idea of conflicting files. Um, if the cat acts up, I'm going to have to apologize in advance. This thing is literally driving me nuts. The last time I tried to make one of these to kind of talk about like conflicts and like how mod authors look at she literally jumped on my desk and was walking almost across my keyboard. So I'm fingers crossed here. Okay, so games. Well, let me start out talking about a conflict. A conflict. A lot of times you hear a conflict is not necessarily a conflict. Like a file conflict. I mean, you can call it that, where one file overwrites another, but it's not truly a conflict because that's what a mod does. A mod changes one thing into something else. For example, a shirt texture might be blue, but a mod changes that texture so that it's now green. So it's not truly a conflict, it's a mod. Usually, a conflict is when the change is unexpected or causes unexpected results. Um, for example, can crash your game or make some of the AI not work properly. Those are things I would consider a conflict. And so when you hear the term conflict, please don't think that it's because a file there's two different files, because that's what mods are. Okay, so on that note, um, a game is comprised of code and files. So a file can be a texture. It can be, here comes this cat. So it can be a texture. It can be how something looks, which is a mesh. It can be environment like trees, just different things. Um, so a game will have an executable like a program, and then it will have data. And that data is usually a single file that is comprised of many different files. So imagine if you have 10 shirts and you have 10 different files with 10 different textures of shirts. What you could do is put all of the textures in a single file and call it just all my shirts. And then you would open all my shirts and locate where in that file, let's say, the blue shirt is, and then that's what you would extract or load. That is what a BSA or BA2 is. It's an archive file. It takes all of these loose files, and they call them loose files because they would exist in your game folder. So, for example, let me show you my game folder, which is here. So here is Fallout 4, okay, screenshots and all of that. But here's the data folder. So you can see that, here's plugins, and here's archive files or BA2 files. And you literally can see up here where we have, let's say, textures. And you can look at the actors, let's say the bloatfly. Okay, so see, these are textures. These are called loose files because they don't exist inside of a BA2 or a BSA archive. So it's loose from that archive. So you'll kind of hear the term loose file, and that's what that means. You can extract things from archives. So you could have, like, to bring that back up, you could actually have this bloatfly texture here in, um, let's say, it won't look like this because this is a mod, but let's say you have this texture. This is a DDS file. So this texture is wrapped around a 3D mesh. That's why it looks kind of weird like this, because it's not really meant to be viewed in 2D. It's actually wrapped in 3D, and I do believe there can be separate components in here as well. But it still is a texture. So, so you can have a BSA or a BA2 archive, or you can have a loose file. So, and the thing is, with Bethesda, loose files win. So it doesn't matter what's in an archive if you have a file with the same name. So, to give you an example, we're going to take a look at unofficial patch. All right, so let's open up, we're just going to open up the textures. There's only one texture, that doesn't help. Let's take a look at this. Okay, so these are all of the files that are in that one archive. Okay, see, you have NIFs, which are meshes. You have PEXs, which are compiled scripts, Papyrus executable, PEX, Papyrus executable, or a compiled script. A PSC is a Papyrus source code, which is, I guess, PSC. At least that's how I look at the anagram. But all of these are in this one BA2 file. So you have a table, which is like a list. Consider it like a notebook. So the notebook is the BA2 file. Inside that notebook, you have pages. Some of those pages have names of files on it, and it's like an index. So it would say go to this particular page in the notebook to access that particular file. And that's kind of like how that works. So you can have individual files in these archives. All right, so the way that Bethesda has it set up, now with Oblivion it's different. Give me 1 second here. Scoot. Sorry. The cat was actually climbing over my keyboard. I apologize for that. It seemed a lot more stronger than what it was. Okay. So, let me get this out of the way. Okay. So, back to what I was saying. Okay. So, you can have different files in different archives. Now, the way Bethesda worked it was in Oblivion, it didn't always look at the load order. It looked at the date stamp on the file. So your load order didn't matter. And also, plugins would count towards your total plugin count even if you didn't have it in a load order, which I don't think that's the way it is with Fallout 4. But we'll talk about all that stuff later. Okay, so here you can see where if you looked at, we're in archive section. So if you look at all these plugins, some plugins have archives, BA2, BSA files associated with them. Not all do, because you have plugins have data records that have data fields, and then you have resource files. So for example, if you have an armor, you might say the armor weighs 3 pounds. But you don't need an image or a script or anything for that. That's just a data field. So that would be an ESP or an ESM. But they can have archives associated with them. And the reason they do that is because as the game loads these plugins, okay, it'll say, for example, it'll load Fallout 4, and then the robot ESM will have its own resource files. If you look up here, it has its own BA2 resource files, but they could have the same file name in, let's say, this particular plugin here, this particular archive or BA2 resource archive here, as it is in, let's say, the main one up here. It could have something, let's say, in animations. So this might have, let's say, a bug crawling, but this allows the bug to crawl and fly. So it can overwrite that animation. Okay, now like I said, they call this a conflict. It's not really a conflict. It just kind of updates that particular animation. So to show you what I mean by conflicts, but again, they don't always think of it in terms of conflict. It's just where one file overwrites another. I'm going to look at the unofficial patch. It's small enough so I can kind of work with it here. So let's take a look at the main, and what we're going to do is I'm going to show conflicts. Let's see, is that what I want to do? Let's see. At least I think that's it. Okay, all right. So yeah, I have a weird little bug where sometimes when you select the item, it doesn't always mark that item as being the target. Okay, so here you can see the name of the file, like the material actors. This file exists in the Fallout 4 materials, so it exists in the vanilla Fallout 4. And then the unofficial patch changes this file. This is, it's not a texture file, it's like a, oh my gosh, it's like a materials file. So there may have been a bug in the materials file here, that was in the original game that the unofficial patch fixed. So you wouldn't call this a conflict. Now, because the unofficial patch here comes after Fallout 4. So you can see Fallout 4 is here, right? And then the unofficial patch comes after it. This will overwrite that. So that means that it fixed whatever problem it might have. Okay, so this is how one file can override another, and it's not necessarily a bad thing, because sometimes a mod author will fix data and you want to overwrite that data. That's not really a conflict. Okay, so let's take a look at Workshop Framework. I believe it's right here. All right, let's bring this one up. Okay, now here's one of the things you'll see in the SS2 forum. Did you overwrite the workshop script? Okay, so here's workshop script right here. The first time workshop script was encountered was in Fallout 4, which was up here. This is let me take this out and put this, we're on this one now, is up in here. But then the unofficial patch changed it. Okay, because see, this is the next source of the same file. This is the way I list it. Here's the file, and here are your sources. So here's the next source of the file, okay, which was in the unofficial patch. So this had the workshop script in the archive. So when the game loaded, it's like, okay, I've got the workshop script reference. Well, hang on, I'm going to change the reference from Fallout 4 now to unofficial patch because I found another one. And then the game says, oh, well, we got one more. We got one in Workshop Framework, which is here. So in this instance, this is what they always ask about in the Sim Settlements 2 forum is, did you overwrite the Workshop Framework script? So you can't really see the script because it's in this BA2. So let's see if we can do it like this. And you can see all the files that is in the BA2. All right, so let's find, let's see, it's, okay, there we go. So you can see it's right here. See, it's here. And if you went over here to, let's say, okay, let's go to the unofficial patch in the main. Show the files. Okay, and let's also find, okay, so there's workshop script. So it's also in this unofficial patches archive. If a file exists as a loose file, which is here, these will always win no matter what is in these archives, because that is the last thing the game checks. The game starts looking sequentially to see, okay, is a file, I've got a plugin, does it have any BA2 or BSA archives, resource archives? Yes, it does. So let me get the file list out of that, and so forth, right down the line sequentially. And then the last thing it'll do is actually see if there is a loose file with the exact same name, because in these BA2s, they are relative, meaning they only have the relative file name. So if you have, let's say you have it on a floppy drive, it's not going to know whether it's on a floppy drive or not. It just knows that whatever the data folder is, then it's relative to wherever that BA2 is at. So if the BA2 is in Fallout 4 data, then the actual file name would be Fallout 4 data, and then whatever is inside that BSA or BA2. So these will always win. And that's when you'll actually hear, do you have a loose file, or did another mod actually copy a loose file out? Because some mods will actually do that. Some mods actually have an ESP, a plugin. They'll have a plugin. They will have archives, and then they'll turn right around and have loose files. So if you change, let's say you put in another mod, you says, oh, well, I've got a mod here that changes, like, that makes my armor look a certain way, or makes my companions act a certain way, or has a certain type of gameplay element to it, and there's loose files, or that, now that wouldn't necessarily, well, yeah, if it's a script. So if it's a script that's loose, it doesn't matter. You're like, okay, I'm going to change this mod to something else, and you're like, okay, I installed it, but it's not working right. It's because the mod probably has what it needs, but there's a loose file that's overriding it. So remember, it takes it sequentially from the top of your load order down, and then the last thing it checks is a loose file with the same name. So that would kind of be what the conflicts actually are. So some are wanted and some are unwanted. And that happens with that's about all modded games. So a person, like, when somebody gets on the forums and like, hey man, this isn't working right, and goodness knows my modded game has so much stuff in it that not everything works like it should. Um, I've got a weird bug now I'm trying to track down with previs precombine crashes. It may not even be the previs precombine. It could be the fact I've got a mod that is scanning a list, and somehow it's looking at that data and it shouldn't, or something is done when things are not ready. I'm not sure. I'm not 100% positive, but it's something along those lines. It is intermittent. It's not consistent. If you have a consistent data problem, like I did with the Pip-Boy, whenever I brought up the Pip-Boy, it would crash. Try to bring up my weapon, it would crash. And I had to unequip everything and then manually equip everything back, and then it worked just fine. So somehow the data got scrambled or corrupted. That could be an inherent bug in the game code. It could be a bad mod or corrupted data in one of the archives. It can happen. Okay, so that'll get you started on that, and then I will make another one real quick, provided the cat sleeps. Oh man, I'll make another one real quick to see if I can help with some more of these things you're having, like with Buff Out 4. We'll take a look at that, and I'll show you some of the things about that to try to help you understand, because I think that's really important, and that's to me that's an investment that's absolutely worthwhile. So give me a little bit here and to put it together, and I will post something back up here shortly.